Welcome back to the deep dive where we sift through all those notes you've saved and try to extract the most interesting and important bits.
hmm
Today we're diving into a phrase you've probably heard before,
Yeah.
the lesser of two evils.
Oh, a classic.
It sounds simple enough, right?
Right.
But as with most things, the more you think about it, the more
hmm
complicated it gets.
Absolutely.
And to help us unpack all of that, we've got expert speaker joining us
Happy to be here.
who knows all about the history and philosophy behind tough choices.
Let's dive in.
So first off, what exactly is this lesser evil principle?
Well, I think a good way to think about it
Yeah.
is the situations where none of your options are actually good.
Right, like when you're stuck
Exactly.
between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, and you have to choose the option that will cause the least harm.
Even if it's not
Yeah.
100% morally
Uh,
perfect.
Exactly. It's not about finding a solution that you're happy with, but more like one you can live with.
Right, you're not going to celebrate.
You're not going to throw a party, but you can sleep at night.
Right.
And what's interesting is this isn't just some modern saying. This idea goes way back, like ancient Greece, way back.
Oh, yeah.
It's a deep philosophical concept.
I see that in the notes here.
Mm-hmm.
Even Aristotle was wrestling with this idea.
He was.
Yeah.
He even said that choosing the lesser evil
Mm-hmm.
can be seen as a good thing.
Oh, wow, so?
Well, because you're actively moving away from the greater evil.
So it's more about,
It's about choosing the path that leads to the least suffering.
I guess that makes sense.
Right. It's subtle, but it's important.
Yeah.
Aristotle wasn't saying evil is good,
Right.
but he was acknowledging that in an imperfect world,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we're forced to make these tough choices.
Where there's just no winning.
Exactly.
Yeah. Makes you wonder how much this kind of thinking has shaped decisions throughout history.
Oh, I'm sure it has.
And speaking of decisions,
Yes.
the one place where this concept seems to pop up all the time is in politics.
Oh, absolutely. Especially in systems where you have two main parties.
Right.
Voters often feel like they're stuck choosing between
Yeah.
the lesser of two evils.
Rather than someone they actually believe in.
It's almost like you're picking the candidate you dislike the least.
Yeah.
Rather than the one you support the most.
I know in the notes there's an example from the 2002 French election
Oh, yes. A great example.
that really highlights this.
Voters had to choose between Jacques Chirac and Jean-Marie Le Pen, who was a far-right candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this graffiti
Mm-hmm.
that said, "Vote for the crook, not the fascist."
Wow. Yeah.
Talk about a stark choice.
Really drives the point home.
Right. And Chirac did end up winning
Yeah. Like a landslide, right?
82% of the vote.
Wow.
But it raises some interesting questions about how this lesser evil idea
Mm-hmm.
affects democracy.
Yeah.
Does it really reflect what people want?
If they're always just choosing,
If they're always settling for the least bad option
right, rather
than someone who truly represents them.
it's a question I think a lot of voters grapple with,
Oh, for sure.
especially these days.
Especially now.
But this idea isn't just limited to elections, is it?
No, not at all. It comes up in all sorts of political decisions.
Like what?
Well, like going to war or negotiating international treaties.
Oh, right. Where leaders have to make decisions.
Where every option
Hmm.
has a huge cost.
Yeah.
And they have to really think about the consequences.
What a heavy burden to bear.
It really is.
Knowing your choices could affect so many people, even if there's no easy answer.
Right. But that's why it's so important to be able to think critically
Hmm.
and make nuanced decisions.
Right. You can't just blindly accept something.
Just because it's presented as the lesser evil,
Right. We need to really
we
examine
need to look at the options,
all the
the potential outcomes,
Yeah.
and most importantly, our own values.
And what they tell us to do.
It's about really thinking for yourself and not just going along with something
Right.
because it's framed as the easy way out or
The lesser evil.
Right.
Ugh.
There's a whole ethical side to this, too.
Yeah. How do we even decide which evil is lesser?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah. Are we talking about the immediate impact or like the long-term consequences?
That's where things get really complicated.
It's like a philosophical riddle.
It is. And your notes actually mention a guy named Michael Ignatieff,
Oh, yeah.
who wrote a whole book about this called The Lesser Evil.
I was just getting to that.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. What did he have to say about all this?
Well, he looked at those really tough situations where there just aren't any easy answers.
Okay.
Like fighting terrorism.
Right. Where you have to balance individual liberties
Mhm.
with national security.
It's a tough one.
It's like a moral tightrope walk.
Exactly. And Ignatieff says that in those extreme cases, finding that balance between freedom and security is absolutely crucial.
So even when we're talking about the lesser of two evils,
Mm-hmm.
we can't just throw our principles out the window.
No, exactly. He's not saying we should just accept bad things,
Okay.
but he does say that sometimes we have to make really difficult choices,
Mhm.
but those choices should be made with the goal of minimizing harm,
Okay.
respecting human rights,
Right.
and upholding democratic values as much as possible.
So it's like we have to hold on to those values,
Exactly.
even in the toughest situations.
Yeah.
I guess context matters too.
Oh, absolutely.
Choosing between two brands of coffee
Right.
is way different than a president
Oh, huge difference.
making a decision that could affect millions of lives.
The scale of the decision, the
Mhm.
potential consequences,
Right.
the information you have available,
All plays a part.
it all adds to the complexity.
And there's no easy formula.
Nope.
Speaking of context,
Yes.
I see in notes here a historical example.
Oh, which one?
The debates about slavery and states' rights
Mm-hmm.
back in 19th century America.
Ah, yes. Another great example.
Voters back then were also having to choose between
They were.
options that weren't ideal.
It seems like a recurring theme throughout history. People
Wow.
having to balance their values,
Yeah.
figure out what they're willing to compromise on.
To reach their goals.
Exactly.
And it feels like we're still struggling with that today,
Oh, for sure.
especially in our current political climate.
Definitely the 2016 and 2020 U.S. elections come to mind,
Mhm.
where both candidates had incredibly high disapproval ratings.
So many people felt like they were voting for
Right.
the least bad option
Choosing the lesser of two evils.
rather than someone they actually liked.
Exactly. And that can really make people feel disillusioned
Oh,
with
totally.
the whole system.
Like their vote doesn't even matter?
Exactly. But this concept goes beyond just American politics.
Oh, right. Like what else?
Well, you see it in global conflicts, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like the conflict between Israel and Palestine,
Right.
where both sides feel threatened,
Mm-hmm.
and finding any kind of compromise is incredibly difficult.
It seems almost impossible to find a solution
What is a tough one?
that everyone can agree on.
Right. Any potential solution will involve compromises
Mm-hmm.
that some people will see as unacceptable.
Right, because they feel like they're giving up too much.
Exactly. It highlights just how weighty this whole idea of choosing the lesser evil can be.
Yeah, especially on a global scale.
Absolutely.
Are there any other areas where this comes up?
Oh, definitely.
Like what?
Think about public health debates.
Mm-hmm.
Things like mandatory vaccinations
Oh,
or restrictions on personal freedoms during a pandemic.
right.
Those often force us to weigh individual rights
Mhm.
against the well-being of the entire community.
It's that classic tension
It is.
between individual liberty and the greater good.
Finding that balance is a constant challenge.
And there are no easy answers.
Yeah.
It really shows how this choosing the lesser evil idea
Mm-hmm.
isn't just some abstract philosophy.
It's a real part of our lives.
It's woven into our personal choices.
in our societal decisions.
Exactly.
And by recognizing that, we
Yeah.
can approach those tough decisions with more awareness and thoughtfulness.
So it's not about finding the perfect answer.
Right.
It's about being aware of the complexities
And understanding the nuances of each situation.
and making choices that align with our
And
values,
even when those choices are far from ideal.
even when there's no clear winner.
Exactly.
This has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
It seems like there's a fine line
There is.
between accepting that sometimes we have to make tough choices
Mhm.
and using the lesser evil idea to justify actions
Right.
that might actually go against our values.
There's something to be mindful of, for sure.
Yeah, it's a tough one for sure, this whole idea of choosing the lesser evil.
It is.
It's really made me think about how complicated decision-making can be, both for ourselves and for society as a whole.
Yeah, it's not always about finding the right answer.
Yeah.
It's more about navigating those gray areas.
Where every choice has some kind of consequence.
Exactly. And recognizing that we
Right.
don't always have perfect options.
Right, like we're often dealing with the best of the bad choices.
And even those choices can have unintended consequences.
Yeah, you never know how things will actually play out.
So it's all about being aware of those complexities
Okay.
and approaching decisions with a sense of responsibility.
Thinking about the impact.
Exactly. Thinking about how our actions might affect others.
You know, we've been talking about these big historical events and political decisions,
Yeah.
but it occurs to me that this lesser evil principle
Mm-hmm.
It shows up in our everyday lives, too,
Oh, absolutely. All the time.
like in those small choices we make,
Right.
where we're weighing different values.
Thinking about what's important to us.
Yeah, and trying to figure out the best way to move forward.
Yeah. Maybe not with the same weight as like a wartime decision.
Right.
But still with that sense of
Yeah.
trying to do the right thing.
Like when you're at the store
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to decide
Yeah.
between a product that's cheaper but might have some ethical issues.
Right. Like maybe it was made using unfair labor practices.
Exactly. Or
Yeah.
choosing between telling a little white lie
Mm-hmm.
to spare someone's feelings.
Versus being totally honest.
Yeah, even if it might hurt a little.
Those everyday choices, they all reflect that same idea.
Of weighing the potential harms and benefits.
Trying to find the path that causes the least negativity.
It's like a mini version of those bigger dilemmas
Exactly.
that we face as a society.
And it shows us that ethics aren't just some abstract concept.
Right.
They're a part of our daily lives.
It's those choices we make every single day.
And by becoming more aware of those choices
Okay.
and having open conversations about our values,
Mm-hmm.
we can learn to navigate those tough situations.
Where there's no easy answer.
Exactly, with more compassion and understanding.
Well said. I think that's a great point to end on.
I agree.
Choosing the lesser evil isn't about finding the perfect solution
No,
or letting ourselves off the hook.
it's about taking responsibility
Right. Recognizing the complexities,
and doing the best we can,
even when it's hard.
even when it's really, really hard.
Well, this has been an eye-opening deep dive.
It has.
I thought I had a pretty good grasp on this concept,
Mhm.
but it turns out there's a lot more to it than I initially thought.
There's always more to learn.
Huge thanks to expert speaker for helping us unravel all of that.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, we leave you with this. What examples of choosing the lesser evil have you come across in your own life? Where do you draw the line? It's something to think about as you go about your day. And until next time, this has been The Deep Dive.